My favorite kind of marketers are the ones with wild backgrounds. Former theater nerds, former Disney characters, former Wall Street brokers, and everything in between. My guest this week is a former high school teacher turned agency founder, Brendan Hufford of Growth Sprints. Brendan has learned some of the most important lessons about building connections from the nucleus of high school culture, the cafeteria lunch table. His approach to supporting his clients is a lot like his approach to molding young minds. First unify, then simplify. Connected brand. We just have a good time and we start cold and weird and awkward like this.
It's cold open. It starts with Jim in the office just looking at the camera.
Just like a
When I was a high school teacher, I got really inspired by that show, and I would do all sorts of pranks on people. But it would be like long pranks, so I would actually forget that they had happened. I put my signature. We didn't have department chairs at the high school I worked at, so I put in my signature of all my emails, social studies department chair. And 6 months later, I got called down to the principal's office, which is just as scary, even if you're a teacher, to get called down.
It never goes away.
And my boss goes, without missing a beat, she goes, as the social studies department chair, what do you think about this? And I was like, oh, that's so funny. I just made that happen. I also took a label maker and started labeling like tons of stuff throughout the school, like property of the social studies department.
Yeah.
I took one of my colleagues' desks and I turned it around. I put all of her stuff back on it perfectly, but I had turned it backwards. And I had forgot that I had done that until the next morning. I just heard a loud bang. And she had gotten in her chair and gone to scoot into her desk and just slammed her knees into it.
Oh, the bruises. Oh,
it was so bad. It was stuff like that where it was just mischief. When you work in a high school, you got to have fun.
Absolutely. Well, as one prankster to another, I love those pranks. I think they're fantastic. And I also just love your vibe. I love all the work that you're doing and all the things that you're doing. First off, let's introduce you. Let's tell folks a little bit more about Brendan Hufford and what you do for fun and for not fun. Everything in between.
Look, frankly, this is all fun. It's a hard thing explaining to my wife, she's like, well, you like what you do, so it's not really work. And I'm like, wow, hold on. It doesn't mean it's not hard or stressful. But I am blessed that there is a Venn diagram overlap between I do really like these things. I really like marketing. I really like software. My professional work right now is helping companies scale from 10 to 100 million in revenue through short, focused marketing sprints. That's the value prop of growth sprints in a nutshell. What I do for fun very much comes from that teaching background. And I was just into fitness. I was building all these little side businesses and all this other stuff. Most of what I do for fun now is coach my kids' sports teams, hang out with my kids. And I've really started to enjoy CrossFit. Not because CrossFit's the opposite of Fight Club, right? The first rule of CrossFit is tell everybody.
So you have to tell
CrossFit.
Everybody about it, just like the first rule of being a vegan.
Yeah, it's the first and second rule, right? But I really enjoy it. I like doing challenging things with other people. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a long time, and that
I'm learning so much on this call, by the way.
Yeah, sorry. I love that, right? It's super fun to try to choke your friends unconscious, but after a while, there's only so much your body can take. And when you are training with 20-year-olds who don't realize you have to be able to go to work tomorrow and function, and they want to tear your ACL every day, eventually you're pass. And I might go back to that at some point in the future. It just doesn't make sense for me right now. But I really enjoy CrossFit because it's just a very strenuous, challenging thing with a group of other people. I realized that was the thing I missed most about jiu-jitsu. Wasn't the training aspect or the fighting aspect, although those are super fun. But it was more of just the camaraderie. It was that garbage time, that before time, and especially that after time when you are just physically exhausted and you just have like small conversations about life.
Yeah.
That's what I really missed. And I get that through CrossFit now.
It's so funny because the terminology that you use to describe CrossFit and jujitsu is very much the feeling of scaling from 10 million to 100 million. It's excruciating. It's painful,
Yeah.
but it's also the camaraderie. It's also the journey and the experience. The pain is actually what makes it so enjoyable ultimately in the long run because you've overcome so much of that pain. I have to imagine there's a connection between the two of like you helping businesses work through that pain and you yourself work through that pain recreationally.
You know, I love remote culture. I love like this is an actual office. It looks exactly like the old bedroom that I was in my house, which my 10-year-old took over. But like, so this is an actual office. I get to leave the house. I love that. I like having a small commute and everything. I really miss being in office. I don't miss the commute, but if I lived close to an office building, I would love to go into an office every day and just be around other humans. I really, really miss that. I got to, when I was in-house at Active Campaign for of the whatever year and a half that I was there, 2 years, we get to go in office for a couple months in between COVID outbreaks. And that was the best. That was some of the most fun that I've ever had. Now, it helped that I had really great coworkers, like really fun people to work with. But I thought about that recently where I was just like, I really miss like doing like it is to your point, like the exact same thing. Like we're all working on something really hard, but it's scrappy and we're there together and you feel like you don't want to let your friends down and like that. Like I like that personally.
Yeah. Well, I do too. I mean, that's my sweet spot. And that's where I've been for the last, 10 years of my career is helping businesses in that phase of scale because it's fun. You get to be scrappy. You build a lot of resilience, but you also build a lot of really close relationships in the pursuit of building a brand experience that you're really, really proud of.
Yeah. And frankly, that post 100 million mark, even though like when I was at Active Campaign, we were already there.
Yeah.
That's not for me, maybe. That's not my favorite. I've worked with a lot of clients in that phase. And like, if legal needs to review the blog posts, I'm out. Like that's too much.
I'm in the same boat.
Bureaucracy, no thanks.
I think that's the pranksters in us. Too much red tape and we're out.
Yep. Oh, 100%.
Well, I mean, Connected Brand has taken on so many different permutations and iterations with all the different folks we've talked to throughout the first season. I'm curious, just from your perspective, having built some great brands and now getting to work alongside incredible brands, how do you define brand?
So I've held this definition. I don't know who first said it, but I've held it for a long time that your brand, whether it's a corporate brand or a personal brand or whatever, brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I think about that a lot. And, I just like, I saw a picture of like a bunch of my friends recently had gotten together, not like without me. They were just all at a conference together. And they shared a picture with a group of us. And I was like, oh, and I literally had this, and let's talk about like invasive thoughts. My brain immediately was like, oh, I wonder if they talk shit about you when they were there. And I was like, did you give them a reason to do you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing where it's like, I really don't give a shit most of the time, but like, there is part of me that's like, oh, there was a pause moment of like, oh, are you being thoughtful about like your interactions with people, or are you like moving way too fast, saying yes to too many things, letting people down like that? I'm a chronic overpromiser and underdeliverer because I say yes to fucking everything.
Wow, we are the same person in different fonts. Because like check prankster saying too much, helping companies from that 1 to that 10 to 100 million scale. Like whoa. But your friends, I'm sure they love you.
Well, I mean, but if I deserve it, it's like, oh yeah, there's that. Because I don't always see that. Back to the teaching thing. Like, I don't always see like you don't see. Yes, I see it on like calls, right? Like what the package looks like, but you don't see the label from inside the jar very often. And I remember when I was teaching, one of my favorite students I ever had, I had them like for a couple different classes over a series of years, and they kind of confided in me as they were about to graduate. Like, I was really intimidated by you when I first met you. And I was like, why? And they're like, look at you. Like, I'm 6'1", 250, very beardy, and like very loud. and extroverted in spaces and stuff.
Mm.
So and I was like, I had no idea that anybody could ever perceive me as being intimidating.
Mm.
And I've noticed the same when I'm like coaching teams with my kids, and probably even in my work, where some people are like, that's too much. Like that's too much. So like it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not manipulating anything, but I am trying to be a little bit more thoughtful, about the way I move in the world. And I think to the point of like, even like let's call it like a company brand or a corporate brand, like being thoughtful about those sorts of things. Like, are we doing things? And I think this happens a lot with marketing. We don't realize what else is happening in the company. We're working so hard to do all these things, like have people say positive things about us when we're not around. And other people in the company, while they are doing things that maybe benefit the company or they think benefit the company, are absolutely destroying that trust in that brand. And if we're not aware of it, then that hurts a lot of what we do.
But I think you just hit the nail on the head, right? So it's the things that people are saying about you when you're not in the room. And ultimately what you're aspiring to do is not for them to say superficial things about, surface level things. They're like, oh yeah, he's a nice guy, generic things, right?
Yeah.
It's the level of trust that you're trying to achieve such that people are saying things with depth, with clarity, with the same level of intentionality that you're navigating your life with as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. You want people that, I use this analogy of like, we sit at the same lunch table all the time. Yeah. And I think that's the right way to think about it. I want people to I want the people that I want to attract and the people I want to work with and the people that I want to, that you would want as customers. You want them to feel like, oh, they sit at my lunch table, right? Like we're friends. They are a trusted, advisor, partner, whatever.
So simple. The cool kids table too. It's very much like communal, right? Like you're creating a warm, inviting, safe space for folks to naturally just gravitate towards, both you as a person, but also companies. This is what you're doing to help companies architect that same lever of what at Lubentide we'd call it invitational, this invitational practice where everybody and anybody is invited. Just come in, the vibes are really good. And if there is a commercial relationship to be had here, then let's pursue it. If not, we just all had a really good time and we got to connect with each other in a really meaningful way.
Whenever I onboard new clients, I always ask them, like, as a matter of personal taste, because I have this belief that the best marketers stay at companies when they have impact and when they are making things they like, right? And those two things kind of have to happen. If you're having a ton of impact, but you think the work you're doing is garbage, then you might not stay very long. Yep. Or if you love the stuff, but it's not having a ton of impact, then you might not stay very long. So in that, I think when I onboard new clients with growth sprints, I always ask, what do you like? I want to make things that work for the company, but I also want to balance this with I'm not affronting your personal taste when I make a content recommendation or something. I want to take that into account. I've learned over time that matters quite a bit. And I'm always amazed. Yeah. Sometimes people are like, oh, I love this and I love that. And I'm like, cool, we have the same taste. And there are other times where people are like, oh, I love Neil Patel. And I'm like, cool. That's not me, but good to know. There are people, they just have a different taste and I'm okay with that. Or they're like, oh, I love Morning Brew and that newsletter. And I'm like, that's cool. I hate it. I've tried to subscribe to that newsletter 5 times because people keep telling me I should. And I'm like, this is always awful. This is not for me. It's just, and it's not that I'm better or I have the right opinion. It's just, they have a different taste. And I think that's what you want is to be somebody's, my friend Jay Akunzo talks about it all the time. Don't market more, matter more. Be somebody's favorite.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the classic marketer's dilemma is trying to be everything to everyone. And the fact that Morning Brew doesn't actually wet your palate, pun intended, on the Morning Brew, but that is very much an important sign of the fact that they have actually done one step closer to finding the audience that they're going to do business most effectively with. And it's great. I think it's a great mindset to have. As you're working with companies, though, I'm curious to hear the mindset shift that you most often have to overcome as you're helping them harness the power of their brand so that And I think that's the big difference between the 10 million and the 100 million. But what are some of the mindset shifts that you need to start helping to re-engineer or re-architect in the clients that you work with?
So I think part of it, especially I work almost exclusively with software companies. And I branch out of that sometimes if there's like a really interesting person that wants to work with me or company, or I just think like I can help a lot. Like I've worked with a couple local businesses in the last year, and I'm like, that's super rewarding. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things that I have to overcome with them is channel strategy, where the channel strategy becomes like the company strategy. So it's like, all right, our content for SEO is keyword research, and it's this, and it's the same way we've done SEO for the last 10 years, and that lives there. Then social media lives here, and then email lives here, and they don't talk to each other. Like there's no umbrella of like, here's what we're doing from a campaign perspective or whatever. And that sort of like siloing or like dissociated marketing has become really, really challenging to overcome. Especially when they come to work with me and I'm like, hey, maybe they came for something. They saw like I've grown a big LinkedIn audience or a big newsletter or have a community, or I'm really good at SEO, like whatever the entry point was. Almost always I'm like, look, like my clients get run of platform of my brain. Like I'm going to try to help you with everything I can, because I know if I help you with this piece, but I ignore this other thing that I could really help you with, like we're not going to get the most out of it that we could. So, and they're like, oh, that like there is a mindset shift that has to happen. Now, sometimes that happens before I work with them. One of the hardest things to break them out of, honestly, is what I call checkbox marketing, where it's not a channel specific thing, but they're just on this endless treadmill of like one blog a week, one podcast every other week, one webinar a week, like it's like X output per time, like, and that's how all the marketing programs are, and they've never questioned it. Like when I ask, why do you do that? I'll give you an example. When I ask Amanda Natividad, she's the VP of marketing at Spark Toro, I said, like, why do you do the things you do? She had very specific reasons, like why they run and they do on surface level what would appear to be checkbox marketing, right? Monthly office hours, every other week newsletter, that sort of thing. Very thoughtful answers about time and energy and leverage and all of this sort of thing. And I was like, oh, neat. Like they don't do a podcast. And I think they could, like, if you asked me to have a marketing podcast with Amanda Natividad and Rand Fishkin, like I'll listen to the first 10 episodes of that 100%. Like
sign me up.
But they don't do it because of those reasons. Like it is not worth them focusing on right now. And I think so many places, they're just running through that checkbox marketing. That's probably the biggest mindset shift. The second one is just unreasonable expectations. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine recently reached out to me. They work at a big company, 150 million plus in revenue. They're launching a podcast. They sent me the trailer for the first episode and it looks amazing. And they're like, our goal is 10,000 downloads for the first episode. And I was like, cool, what's that look like? They're like, well, I'm just trying to ask people to share it. And I was like, wait, your boss told you. And it literally, when I asked like why, it was like, oh, that's what the top like 0.1% of podcasts, that's how many downloads they get on first episodes. And we want to be the top 0.1% of podcasts. So we're going to do that. Oof. And I was like, well, okay. But like, you're not Barack Obama and like on Spotify, and Spotify is going to put you on the homepage for, 6 months or something. Like that's not right. You're not going to get that. And it really frustrated me that like they were willing to put so much money into production and so little into promotion and things like that. Like there are a lot of those types of things where it's like I've been thinking a lot about this like production versus promotion thing, where a lot of companies think like if it's good enough, it'll just. And I believe in that. Like John Bonini talks a lot about like good content gets found. Right. But there's some companies that historically have put so much into production and then they never promote it. They will spend $100,000 on a marketing campaign to make a show. Basically, they make like a 6-episode TV show and then they tweet about it twice and send 2 emails. And you're like, yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, so those two things that you find most often happen is the conveyor belt, if you will, the checklist process of just doing the what and the how, but forgetting the why. And then two, also forgetting about the groundswell that you need to develop if you are going to build something really meaningful. Classic, right? Marketing, promotion, PR, like the type of groundswell that you need to build to start building a followership. And I do agree that like good content will get found, but the best content actually has orchestration behind it so that it has the highest likelihood and chance of being found. And that's where I think brands have a really hard time with trying to scale the work that they're doing, is because they think that they're going to be like a TikTok that just suddenly goes viral. But unfortunately, brands have drag because they're brands and they're not just someone just being really vulnerable and open and fun and hilarious, or I don't know, kind or something like that out there in the wild. And so brands have to resist that drag and compensate for it with the content that they're creating by having that right orchestration for their promotion and distribution.
I agree. And I think that the other thing, if we're talking about mindset shifts, there are some people with the best of intentions that are very like programmatic and integrated, and they're like, here's the Asana checklist for the launch and all the Trello boards and everything. And I think that's fine. And they're like, look, we're not doing production, we're doing promotion. But the problem is there's no like soul to it. There's no, and this is where we get into brand of like, do you actually have an opinion? Like, holy shit, we don't need another like B2B career interview podcast. Like we just don't need that. There has to be some sort of premise development. Like unlike every other show that does the same thing, we do this differently. And like I've been on those recently, and then afterwards they're like hounding you like, oh, can you interact with this other guest posted about their episode? Can you interact with that? Can you share this? Can you comment on this? Can you do this other thing? Can you email your audience? Can you share it in your community? And it's like, look, if you make me bring the community and the content, like I'm out. There was no upside for me.
Too much heavy lifting.
And they're like, oh, we'll send you some clips. Like, motherfucker, I can make my own clips. Do you see this? Do you see how I'm talking to you right now? Like, I don't need you to ask me stupid questions so that I can get some clips. Like sorry, I'm like really high. I'm like I've had a lot of coffee today. I'm really over caffeinated, but like, you know what I mean? Like you don't need that sort of stuff. And like, you're not offering any value to the person in there.
Exactly. It's transactional, right? It's just, what can I get from you and what can I do to help use your platform to help further my platform? And that I think is where folks like misunderstand the concept of a brand versus a connected brand, right? Like a connected brand is not here trying to have just a single direction type of transactional relationship. A connected brand actually understands all of the interworking pieces that help uplift and promote the individual, the community, the customer, your team. Who's doing that really well right now, in your opinion?
So I mentioned SparkToro. I think they do it really, really well for a lot of reasons. Another one is Novatic. Natalie Marcotulio leads the marketing team over there. And they just launched a thing called like Novatic Fanatics, which is a really silly name, but it was all over. And it's literally just like celebrating their customers of like, hey, we have an internal leaderboard of the people that use our product best, and you're one of the ones that use it best. I've forever been obsessed with like ClickFunnels. They are super cringy, but they do a really good job of like those types of things. Like there are so many people that they gave out these like 2 Comma Club awards, which I think is like very aspirational. But when you sell $1 million worth of stuff using their product, they send you a plaque that goes on your wall. And so many people have those in the background of their videos and stuff. It's like, it's a virtue signal basically, but like people are very proud of that. They want to display it. Yeah. The same thing with like Novatic Fanatics, where they're like, people are proud to display those badges. They want to share them on LinkedIn. They want to keep doing well. They want to innovate with the product and get more out of it. Like, I like that sort of stuff where it's like, how do we celebrate our customers? How do we build a sense of community? And what I mean by this, I separate community and audience very strictly. Like audience is like, we help you, and community is like, I'm just here in the background, and like, it's like a dinner party. I'm just introducing you all, and then I'm fading into the background. I don't This is not a marketing type of thing.
Exactly. You're a host. You're just facilitating a party and you're a host. Yep.
But imagine like all your best customers are now talking to each other about how they use the product and what they're doing and all this other stuff. They're getting better just by like chatting with each other. They now have relationships with each other. Sure, it's going to have business outcomes. It's probably impossible to track like how sticky that is. How does it reduce churn? All of those things. But like we know it does. And if you say it doesn't, like that's just silly.
Yeah. What I think has the common through line between all of the brands that you say you admire right now because of the work that they're doing to build connected brands, it's that they've actually stepped out from within. I love that saying you just said earlier about the you know what it feels like from the inside, but the label could be something different. They've actually stepped outside of the jar and they've taken a look at the label. They actually have gotten feedback from others to say, hey, what do you think? Like, what do you think's in there? What do you think about that label? And they're using that information to help architect the secret sauce that is the quality of the substance from within. And I love that approach. And too often marketers are stuck from the inside marketing out. And I think that's where really good marketing goes to die, personally.
Yeah, because you end up doing a bunch of, tactics that maybe have business outcomes, but are not thoughtful of like the humans on the receiving end. You're marketing at people and not actually caring like whether they like that or not.
Yeah. Or with them.
Or it's misaligned incentives. You see this a lot with companies that like take on, you see this a lot with brands that take on a lot of like sponsors. And then pretty soon you're like, oh, all of your LinkedIn posts are about your sponsors and all of your podcast interviews are interviewing your sponsors and all your emails are about sponsors and like, cool, secure the bag. But I'm out. Like, I'm not just listening to you make money. Like there has to be some value for me as a customer or whatever.
Well, that also just fundamentally dilutes the brand because if your brand is just an amalgamation of other brands and their values as well too, you just suddenly get lost in all the noise of what you're trying to say and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, or you pursue something where it's like, oh, we generated 200 meetings this month through outbound. Like, that's amazing. Great. You're like, well, we also sent 400,000 emails. And a lot of people hate us. Because it was really crappy outbound and we weren't thoughtful and we did it this wrong way. Or like, oh, we did all this AI, SEO, programmatic content. And then it's like, oh, we were talking before, like the risk of some of these things is so high where it's like these things could really hurt your brand because you're not thinking about how it actually connects to stuff. You're just looking at like treating it like a funnel of like, this much in gets me this much out. It's just unit economics. And to your point, it's just transactional marketing.
Yeah. I mean, growth at all costs, right? We've seen the cost of growth at all costs. And now we need to be starting to play the long game with looking at the short-term orchestration of integrated, thoughtful, intentional campaigns such that we aren't eroding the long-term trust that we're trying to build with our brand so that we can meaningfully connect and continue to build and scale and grow healthy relationships.
I recently, because like vulnerability time, like I didn't have an awesome second half of last year. And immediately I was like, all right, well, all the stuff that I was like, all the software that I was buying and everything I was paying for that I was just kind of YOLOing, I was like, well, we got to look at this. So I wrote down everything that I was paying for. And I went through and canceled a ton of different softwares.
Interesting.
And let me tell you, the experience, the stark contrast between different brands and the ability to cancel is I don't even have a good analogy because it is so vast between different companies. Like, we're recording this using Riverside. Cancellation for them was great. In fact, at the end, they're like, hey, just a heads up. If you don't want to use this again, no problem. You can we'll keep all of your recordings. Like if you can download them all right now, or we'll keep them for you for this like super tiny like amount per month that you can pay if you want. No big deal. It was delightful. I was like, oh, thank you. Versus like other brands that were a catastrophic nightmare to cancel, where we're talking like 70 plus clicks to go through an offboarding flow. And then I'm getting hounded by SDRs trying to cross-sell me and upsell me. And then like, it was madness with some companies. And this is even like, I can cancel it myself. This isn't even contracts. I can't imagine how stressful it is trying to cancel some of the more predatory software brands out there. Like I have really good friends. I think that whatever, we'll use an example because they've gotten a lot of heat in the past, but like, I think like there are some really talented, amazing marketers that work at Zoom Info, and they do really good marketing, and they're really thoughtful from an editorial process. And I really think some of the stuff they do is cool. And then at the same time, they have every 3 months, I feel like somebody posts on LinkedIn some insane predatory thing that they have in their contract renewal process. And it's like, I get that those things are good for companies and they're good for, what stock prices and shareholder value. But like, holy cow, like, do you know how many deals are not, like, people are not even going to enter the pipeline because they're like, oh, I would never want to deal with that. Like, your marketing can't beat that. And that's never going to show up. They're going to be like, wow, conversions are down. And like, well, 3 months ago, there was that like viral thing on LinkedIn that got 400,000 impressions where somebody called us out. And like, they're not thinking, again, to your point, like, it is a truly disconnected brand. The sales brand and the contract legal brand and the marketing brand are all totally different things.
Yeah. It's so I got to get somebody from Zoom Info on the show because Zoom Info has come up in now this is the third episode that they've been mentioned. The first episode they were mentioned because somebody loves their brand, but they were trying to consolidate their billing so that all the contracts that they managed for their respective teams were consolidated under one contract, and it was impossible to do that. And then in the People Over Everything episode with Nick Bennett and Mark Killens, they are helping Zoom Info build a community, and it's going really well. And now here you are saying the same thing, that like your end to end, the totality of your experience, from your employee experience to your marketing experience, your selling experience, your offboarding experience, everything matters. And a connected brand experience prioritizes all of those parts, and then the sum of those parts equally.
Definitely. And I think even stuff like that, where I started my own marketing community because I joined all the other ones, and they were all terrible.
Oh yeah, wait. Let's tell people about your marketing community.
So when I was in-house at Active Campaign, I love communities, and I was like, let me try and join all the communities that existed on Slack, because that's where I already am. There's such a benefit to building a community where people already are. As much as people like, don't build Facebook groups, I'm like, look, we're also on Facebook. Like, a lot of us are. Like, you can still do that. It's really good. Or put it in Slack. Like, know where your audience already is. Don't make them come over to like a Circle community or some other weird. I've had so many people be like, oh, join my Discord. And I'm like, I'm not installing another thing. Like, I'm not. So, but that's like a piece of it. But when I was in-house at Active Campaign, I didn't see a community that existed that cared as much about career as it did about marketing. So, because we are all very, very good at our jobs. Right. Like, so let's just suspend the disbelief and pretend that's the case. But like, we're all really good at marketing, but a lot of us are not good at navigating that career nuance of like, how do I take the stuff I did and put it in a deck? And you end up like, we don't realize like visualizing the value of our work really matters, and executive presence matters. And like, my most replied to email that I've ever sent was an email about executive presence, where people were like, oh, wait, how do I get that? Like, I need that. How do I do? Like, it's one of those things. So that didn't exist. So I was like, all right, cool. Let me make what I want to exist. So I started a community called All In. It's short for all in-house, but also going all in on your career. And I've loved building that. I don't promote it a lot because I think communities get worse when they get too big. So we have like 1,000 people in there, but I intentionally don't talk about it a lot. Friends that are professional community, like, that's what they do. That's their role, right? They're community people. They're like, no, you could totally have 10,000 people in here and it would still be amazing. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe not.
I'm in a lot of communities that have 10,000 or above. And unfortunately, I am an absentee lurker. I can't handle it.
Yeah, it's just, or you just end up with a lot of takers, right? They're dumping the same question in 7 communities and they're not helping anybody else out. And like, I monitor that pretty voraciously. Like, I send out DMs every day of like, you're being like this, you can't ask people 3 questions in a row. I haven't seen, when I search your name in Slack, I don't see you answering anybody else's questions. So like, and I'll just delete their stuff. I'll be like, I took your thing down. Like, sorry. And I make it like really uncomfortable and harsh because I want to protect that piece. So yeah, All In is wonderful, but it is not marketing for me. I am relentlessly obsessed with how do I make this better for the people in here and better? I just hear so much of like, oh, free communities suck. Like join these paid communities like Pavilion or some like also another abysmal cancellation experience. But like, why would I do that when there's a free one that's better than the paid ones?
Right. I'm stuck on the monetization of communities right now. I mean, it's a really big trend that we're seeing. I refuse to pay to join a community of folks. I don't necessarily think it's the right precedent to set to charge people to be able to get the free knowledge that I know other communities are working really hard to protect and preserve and allow free flowing idea exchange. So I'm personally anti-payment for community. I just think it changes the tone, the tenor, the reason why people are there.
Totally.
So yeah,
it is, and it does change. Yeah, because all of a sudden it can become like, and I think there's a lot of reasons maybe to pay for things, but I think if your only reason for payment is to keep people out or to like do stuff like that, then I'm not a huge fan. But like I said, I've paid for Reforge and Exit 5 and Pavilion and all of these different things, and I think that like it can be fine. But for me, like, it's again, like that sort of piece on the like connected brand. When you start a community, there's a lot of communities where like you have a well-meaning community manager, but every day it's like at channel, at here, promotion. Join our webinar, do this, water cooler, corny ass water cooler question, like all of that bullshit. And I'm just like, yo, we all see through this. And I'm not trying to call anybody out, but there are a couple community builders who I've seen hype up 3 or more communities, but they're not in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And they're not helping. And those communities have all died. Right. Like, it is what it is. I don't want to call anybody out, but like, whatever, if you're listening to this, like fill in, the 3 or 4 that I'm talking about that had like big Slack communities. And then you're like, oh, this is a absolute ghost town.
Yep. I mean, they were at the right place at the right time and then suddenly I personally think if we're on the same page about some of the communities that you're referencing here, they were at the right place at the right time and intercepted a need for a group of individuals that were lacking because of COVID. And then since a lot of the means for which that we can build community and we can idea transference, we can meet each other in person, go to events, like they just forgot to take care of the core, which was that people need to be able to access people and share thought leadership. Well, this has been an outstanding conversation. I expected no less. You are an outstanding human being. If folks want to get to spend time with you, if they want to learn from you, if they want to join All In, how do they find you?
Yeah. So the best way I would say the best way to find me is to, I know this sounds silly, but Google my name, Brendan Hufford. You'll see it. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you can just copy and paste it into Google, or you can paste into LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like the hub for a lot of what I do. I have a newsletter and I have a community and I work with clients and all of these different things. I think that's probably the best place to, because I think like whether you want to join the community or you want to sign up for my newsletter or even you want to work with me, like you want to know how I think ahead of time. And I put a lot of work into sharing what I think on LinkedIn. It is like the entry point. And if you like that, if you're like, okay, cool, we sit at the same lunch table, maybe explore other things. And I intentionally add that friction. Do you know what I mean? Like I want there to be friction because I want it to be good enough that only the people who are like, yes, I'm all in, pun intended, they're the ones that pursue that. Fantastic. Also, sub-brand Lunch Table. I would definitely join Lunch Table. Watch, view, join, whatever you want from Lunch Table, but I'm in. Thanks, MK. Thanks so much, Brendan.